I have moved on from the Egypt conversation, but I guess the comments I left over on other people's pages or, stuff I responded to, now the people are responding back to me. And I got into a real interesting conversation with somebody who I don't know what race they were. I'm assuming that they're white. I've also gotten into arguments with a couple of what I find to be weird, and maybe it shouldn't be seen as weird, but a bunch of Asians. You know what I mean? That seem like they're heavily invested in, again, ancient Egypt not being a black civilization, right? This is all this anti-blackness, right? And what I hate about the conversation, I've said this before, is, and even black people are getting caught up in this mess. I understand Cleopatra, there's holes in her lineage, and her sister was supposedly mixed race. I'm like Hellenistic, Ptolemaic, dynasty. I'm like, let them have Cleopatra. Like, we all know that the Greeks and the Romans, they came in later. The Arabs came in, even after that, in massive ways with the expansion of Islam, after what would that be? The death of the Prophet Muhammad, 632 AD, right? We know this, right? That's why, Egyptian, with Bassem Youssef, that's why there's Egyptians that look like him today, right? We know that there was a mass exodus out of Egypt, right? You look all around Egypt and Chad and Niger and Sudan, and you see the same faces that you see painted on the walls, wearing the same clothing and wearing the same jewelry and wearing the same headdresses and the same hairstyles, and you got a freaking Arab Egyptian with a kufiya and his wife with a hijab talking about we're the original Egyptians. Again, I'm not saying that you don't have people who are mixed race descendant of both, the original black Egyptians, the Greeks, and also the Arabs who came in, later, and even some of the early traders and settlers and people who visited Egypt. If it was, this hub, of innovation and technology and math and science, and it was a center of learning, in the ancient world, right? I'm not, nobody's over here denying that. But at the root of it, ancient Egypt was a black civilization, and all these Egyptians are trying to dodge that reality. So I got into, let me say, the first part of the conversation, which was just funny because I immediately dismantled it within like the 5 seconds of hearing it. So the guy comes at me and he's like, if like, again, this the whole argument is all about this magical line of the sub-Saharan, peoples versus the above the Saharan peoples, right? Even though we've already pointed out and explained that you had the Younger Dryas period where the Sahel was further north than where it currently is now. Like ancient Egypt, for example, used to have hippos, and the last hippos in Egypt disappeared like in the early 1900s, right? The territories, and I'm going to get into this in a second, but I'm saying the territories of many of the animals that, are depicted on the walls in ancient Egypt, uh, with the end of the Younger Dryas period and the expansion of the Sahara Desert moving further south and the shrinking of what would be, the Congo and, the rainforest and the more tropical areas where there, were rains and there was more monsoons and all that stuff, they move further south, right? And this takes me to the conversation about, the hieroglyphs, right? I get all this talk about how ancient Egypt was this, Levantine civilization from, people from the Levant, which is like Israel, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, right? That's what the Levant. Mesopotamia is like further over. That's where the Euphrates and the Tigris River are. So that's where you're talking about, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon and what else are we talking about over there? Gilgamesh, the Sumerians, right? That's like what people classically consider the Middle East, but overall, the Levant, which is where Israel is, Palestine, Jerusalem, all that good stuff. Um, you got people saying, ancient Egypt was a Levantine civilization. This is what I find funny, right? Especially the people that want to come at me with the Sub-Saharan African argument. And I actually got ahead of myself. But going back to what the guy was saying, he was like, well, if ancient Egypt was, this black civilization, and then again, drawing that magic line of Sub-Saharan Africa versus North Africa, he was like, well, why weren't there pyramids, elsewhere in Africa? Why aren't these structures built all over, Africa? And the first part is, this is what's funny is there's over 200 pyramids in Sudan. And it's like, we don't see any pyramids in the Levant. Why aren't there pyramids in the Levant? But I didn't even have to go that route, right? What I find funny is if we look at Europe, outside of Greece, you have no megalithic structures. They're in Greece. Even the Romans, I wouldn't even give it to Romans because the Romans built their buildings with concrete. They poured concrete to build their buildings. They weren't moving megalithic stones. All right. And then the only other place that we could point to in Europe is Stonehenge, which those are megalithic stones, but the quality of it in relation to, let's say, the Machu Picchu or the Giza Plateau is like night and day. He pointed out to me these megalithic structures that are in Greece that are, I forget what they're called, the something like, what are they called? There's some type of stones that basically are kind of put together in a similar way to how the Egyptians put them together and how the Inca put them together. But the quality is not as precise, like the spacing between the rocks. Again, I forget what the name is, but it's in Greece. What is these? What are these megalithic? Let me just pull it up real quick. Megalithic. Hold on. Stones, Greece. Let's see what comes up. 6 megalithic stones. What are these things called? These are called the, and you could tell, like, that there's a similar builder because the stones, the Inca have it, the Egyptians have it, the stones in Greece have it, right? You're dealing with the same fingerprint, which are these little nipples that come out of the stone, right? And if you type in stones with nipples and just go to Google Images, maybe I'll put them in the video, but you'll see them. They got these little nipples that come off of them. But again, the fitting of the rocks is more crude in this image of Greece. And the other thing is we already recognize that the Greeks got their information about how to do things from the Egyptians. Hence Herodotus going there, Pythagoras going there, reading the scrolls in, Alexandria and what was this? Was it called? The Alexandria came later, but I'm saying, the libraries of knowledge that they had in Egypt, reading these documents in, I think it's called it sounds like demonic, but it's not demonic. What is it called? Demotic? How do you say that? Demotic. I guess it's demotic. Anyway, that is the written language, the common everyday written language that ancient Egyptians use. It looks kind of like Arabic. It's read from right to left, just like Arabic is. But it's not Arabic. This is one of the languages that were written on the Rosetta Stone. But the other language that was used largely for a ceremonial purpose are the hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt. Right? And so, getting ahead of myself again. But anyway, the point that I was making to the guy is, when you go into Europe, the megalithic structures stop in Greece. They don't extend out through Europe. So, what the point that he was trying to make is that, the rest of Africa, those people are just, they're not sophisticated because the structures are only in Egypt, despite all the pyramids that are in Sudan. But anyway, and not in the Levant. And then, I just threw it right back at him. I'm like, where are these megalithic structures in the rest of Europe? Right? Again, I'll be the first one to admit I'm all about the Graham Hancock, Younger Dryas period, and there being a cataclysm and all that, and all this technology being lost. Because even today, pretty much nobody on planet Earth knows how anybody did any of this shit. So clearly, that technology was lost. If the world had a nuclear holocaust right now, and we would go back to zero, right? Nobody would know how to do anything. It would just be Mad Max and the Road Warrior, right? All that knowledge would be lost, right? Do you know how to fix your own car? Most people don't. Most people don't even know how to change the oil. We use computers, but does anybody know how to produce semiconductors and create fab factories and stuff like? No, we don't. We would go back to an agrarian society, milking cows and slaughtering pigs and farming, and that's what we would go back to if there was some sort of nuclear holocaust. It would be a big fat reset on the world. And, I think the same thing happened, in ancient times, whether it was a meteor, climate change, precession, end of the Younger Dryas, whatever the heck it may be. I'll put that on the table. But the conversation that we're having and the argument that I'm having is that ancient Egypt was rooted in a black civilization. And that's what black people need to be focused on when having these conversations, and not focused on whether Cleopatra was black or not. That's not the argument. The argument, because what you're allowing them to use that, and you trying to defend the ridiculous, right? Versus, the bigger argument, which is that the roots of ancient Egypt were a black civilization when you go back to the old kingdom. And what I was saying about ancient Egypt and the hieroglyphs is, and this is the funny part, because this is what I used against them about, this magical Sub-Saharan line, which I have a great irritation with, because it's a sneak diss. It's like Sub-Saharan, subhuman, all the people who live below the Sahara are subhuman, all that bullshit, all that racist bullshit, right? But the stupid thing is, I'm like, dude, you backed yourself into a corner, right? Because and I've talked about this before, but when you think about a language, right? Like, people who come up with terms that live, let's say, in the northeast of the United States, right? Where they have winters and blizzards and things like that, right? Even emergency kits that they keep in their car. Somebody who lives in the northeast, in the wintertime, you know what you need to keep in the back of your car just in case your car breaks down? A blanket, something to keep you warm, right? In Arizona, right, what do you think they got to keep in the back? Probably a couple jugs of water, if you get lost in the desert or your car breaks down and it's 107 degrees outside, right? And you're in Death Valley or something like that, right? Completely different way that the different ways in which they exist. But I'm saying somebody who grew up in Southern California their entire life, right? There's things that they're going to be relate to that environment, that desert, hot, arid environment, versus somebody who, whether they live in an urban environment such as New York, or whether they're just in the Northeast or Canada, where they deal with these, ridiculously cold winters, right? And that's going to, change, the experiences they have, and it's going to change the language, the jokes that they have, the idioms, and all these, sorts of things. It's going to change all of that, right? And so I have these people, and they're not just Egyptians, but they're just all these, anti-black people that are like, Sub-Saharan Africa, ancient Egypt was separate. We're above Sub-Saharan Africa, completely ignoring the Younger Dryas period, when you see all the animals that were, in what is now nothing but pure Sahara desert, and claiming that, that everything above this Sub-Saharan line is, the Levant people, right? But when you look at ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, and you look at the iconography of the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, what you see is animals that are, now Sub-Saharan, right? That's what you see. And even then, their territories were expanded. Like, you can go on Wikipedia, you can type in the range of giraffe, and it'll show you like the historic range of the giraffe and the current range of the giraffe. It'll show you the historic range of the rhinoceros. It'll show you the current range of the black rhinoceros. It'll show you what other animals. The ostrich. The ostrich, like to chill in the Sahel. I'm trying to think what other animal chill in the Sahel. The baboons is another one, right? There's all these animals that the ancient Egyptians have depicted in their hieroglyphs that are not animals that are anywhere else, on the planet. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some animals that Egypt shares with the Levant, majority of them being, birds. But let me read to you some of these animals, right? The Syrian brown bear. This is in the Levant. The Persian squirrel. There is no hieroglyph of a squirrel. I looked, searched, Googled, went over to ChatGPT. ChatGPT said this. No squirrels are not typically depicted in Egyptian hieroglyphs. Squirrels are not native to Egypt and were not present in the region during ancient times. Instead, the ancient Egyptians depicted animals that were indigenous to their environment, such as cats, crocodiles, snakes, and birds. These animals were important to ancient Egyptian mythology and often played significant roles in religious and cultural practices. While the ancient Egyptians may have been aware of the existence of squirrels in other parts of the world, they did not include them in their hieroglyphic art or iconography, right? So bears are out because I already looked up bears. There's no bears in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. There's no squirrels in ancient Egyptian hieroglyph. What's funny is they have a rabbit in the Levant called the European hare. And then they have a lynx called the Caucasian lynx. The Caucasian lynx is a medium-sized wild cat that is found in the forest of the Levant, but not in Egypt. And then they have the red fox. The red fox is found in forest and grasslands of the Levant, but not in Egypt, right? So again, people are not going to depict animals and species and fauna and plants and wildlife that they're unfamiliar with. They're only going to depict what they are familiar with. And there's a couple interesting animals that you already know are just straight up African. Crocodiles, the hippopotamus, right? Lions ranges were very extensive. If you go and look in, there were lions in the Middle East. I think there were lions even in Europe, in like the southern parts of Europe. Lions had an extensive range in Africa. So lions, man-eating, big cats, everywhere. So lions are out. So just because the ancient Egyptians depicted lions, that one's out. The scarab beetle. The scarab beetle, which is every time I think of the scarab beetle, I think of that scene in The Mummy where they put all the beetles on them and they like ate them alive and stuff like that. That's all I think of. But we have baboons indigenous to Africa, nowhere else. And the biggest one is the hippopotamus. Because the hippopotamus, not only is it strictly indigenous to Africa, the only other place where there's hippopotamus and they were imported there is Pablo Escobar's hippopotami. Actually, is it it's hippopotamuses? No, hippopotami sounds more accurate. But anyway, there's Pablo Escobar. He had a bunch of pet, hippopotami, and had them, in his backyard, and then they got free, and now they're a freaking invasive species in Colombia because they have toxic poop, and their poop basically contaminates the water and kills off the fish. And so they don't know what to do with all these hippopotami. There's a whole bunch of people that are like, no, don't kill the hippopotamus. You know, they got the little hippopotamus t-shirts on and shit like that. They're protesting that. Right. And then you got the other ones that are like, nah, get rid of these hippopotami, shoot them in the head and be done with it. Right. Like that. Like, so they got like this whole fight going on. And as you could imagine, trying to capture a hippopotamus and all that other stuff, like that's very dangerous, right? Because hippopotamus are the most dangerous species on the planet when it comes to humans. They're number one, like great white sharks, all other type of tigers, lions, whatever. No, hippos are very territorial and they're very aggressive. And so I guess I'm just giving you a little Discovery Channel right there. But anyway, I'm saying baboons. It has cat, cobra, crocodile, falcon, hippopotamus. Ibis, which is like ibis is like the what's so funny is that's the Themis and thoughts. Thoughts. Anyway, Thoth is the god of wisdom and knowledge in ancient Egypt. And, that's basically how he was representing it, right? Anubis was represented as the jackal. The jackal is another one. And even the hippopotamus, what I found funny is the hippopotamus has a god called Tuaret. And Tuaret is this female hippopotamus with big giant titties, right? And it basically represents fertility and pregnancy and all that, right? And it kind of like makes sense, right? You're ancient man, and what does a pregnant woman look like? A damn hippo, swollen and big gut and all that other stuff, right? So anyway, Tuaret is the goddess of fertility, and you can find images all over the place, right? But these are not Levantine animals. These are animals that the further south you go, the further up the Nile you go, due to the fact that ancient Egyptians were southern orientated people, not a northern orientated people. High ground for ancient Egyptians was back, towards, Lake Victoria, moving into Upper Egypt, which is technically, looking at the global orientation, which is south. And we've already covered this, right? When the ancient Egyptians are asked, where they come from, they say Ta Seti, which is land of the bow, which is Nubia. And that their religious centers were in Nubia. Their religious centers were not in the Levant. They didn't go to the Levant for anything other than conquest and glory in the New Kingdom with, I believe, was that Ramses II? So, I don't know where these people get their their arguments don't hold water. They do not want to face the fact that ancient Egypt is rooted in a black civilization. The language, the iconography are that of African animals and fauna. That is what they are of. You don't see, the ancient Egyptian folk pictures of them hunting, hippopotamus. Where are people in the Levant doing any of that? So I just wanted to make this short video, to really highlight that, and point that out when it comes to, these people that, they want to claim that, oh, African Americans, y'all some hijacking. We're not trying to hijack shit. We're trying to prevent you all from constantly and continually denying that ancient Egypt was a black civilization and trying to create black erasure. That's what we're trying to stop. We know, West Africa had a civilization, and the Benin bronzes, and the Congolese swords and all that. That's great. That's all fantastic. Mali, Timbuktu, not a big deal, not a big issue, right? But, when it comes to ancient Egypt, because ancient Egypt is so magnificent, the Arabs come in there and then they want to claim it for themselves. And I actually saw one comment that it was kind of like I don't want to say it was a balanced comment, because even though I did agree with the point, I guess it was balanced. But Because I'm not arguing about Cleopatra being black. I'm saying ancient Egypt was a black civilization. But one of the things in the comment was that it pointed out, it was basically calling out the Arabs for, basically ancient, Egypt is irrelevant, and this is why they want to harp back to, ancient times, what the ancient Egyptians did 5,000 years ago, even though this isn't even the original people. Like, that's the crazy part. But again, this guy wanted to throw the Sub-Saharan African, argument at me. And I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you said it, because all of the animals, other than like the birds that obviously they can fly wherever they want to go, all of the animals that are depicted in the iconography of the ancient Egyptians are animals that even to this day are primarily exist in regions that are sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, when you got to really think about, like, when you create a language and you use what is most familiar to you. Why would the people from the Levant talk about hippopotami and talk about crocodiles and talk about jackals and talk about what other animals, rhinoceros, and talk about giraffe? Where are the giraffe in the Levant? Are there any? Let me ask Chat GPT. Are there any giraffe in the Levant? No, giraffes are not native to the Levant region. Giraffes are native to Sub-Saharan Africa and are not found in the Levant or any other regions outside of Africa. The closest places where giraffes can be found to the Levant is in the eastern part of the African continent, such as Tanzania and Kenya. In ancient times, giraffes were not present in the Levant, and there is no evidence that they were known to the ancient Levantine cultures. Therefore, giraffes would not have been depicted in Levantine art or iconography. But somehow, these people want to tell me that these people came in from the Levant, created ancient Egypt, and then used a language with an iconography that doesn't depict any of the animals in the Levant. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. These people kill me, with all their mental gymnastics. And see, the thing is what I love about this is their shit has never been put to the test. They'll sit there and grab, a whole bunch of, Greek, Roman, Arab, mummies from especially the New Kingdom, and then call it good and say, look at these white mummies. You look at these white mummies, and then go like where a place where like Greeks were disproportionately buried or entombed, right? Because people, they bury their people with their people, right? And then go, oh, see the ancient Egyptians. I'm like, nah, I'm gonna need you to go to that old kingdom. That's what I'm gonna need you to do. I'm gonna need you to go to that old kingdom. And then again, I mean, whether it's Herodotus saying the shit and other Greek scholars that weren't on any racist bullshit, because like the concepts of it didn't really exist like that back then. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but I'm just saying they just simply recorded what they saw. They recorded what they observed. I mean, if you're going to sit there and you're going to take Herodotus's word on everything else, you can't just sit there and go, oh, I don't like this piece, I'm going to throw it out. He was incorrect about this piece right here. But everything else he said about ancient Egypt, we're going to take that at face value. But him saying that he saw black people, or the descriptions of black people as swarthy, or the descriptions of black people having woolly hair, oh, no. He didn't know what he was talking about. He was drunk that day when he decided to write that. Like get real. But yet these people will come through. Like, again, you have the whole aspect of the beliefs of other groups' supremacy over black people. You have the aspect of ancient Egypt is a multi-billion-dollar, industry when it comes to all the people that visit there every day, every year, and they go there. And the ancient, and not the ancient, but the Egyptians, today's Egyptians, want to sit there and claim like they know everything about the pyramids and whatnot. And I'm like, yo, your shit don't even, like, you don't even make sense. Clearly, these people had power tools. You know what I mean? But they want to sit there and tell you about copper tools, chisels, and they were, rubbing a stone, to wear down some damn diorite or what's that shit called? Rose stone or granite, right? And again, the further back you go into the kingdom, that's when you start seeing those stone vases. That's when you start seeing, the statues that are made out of extremely hard materials like diorite or rose stone. And nobody knows how they did it. And then later, as Egypt, fell into decline, whether it was climate change, whether it was a cataclysm, other groups started to come in and they started to, just adopt, what was already there. And I'm saying, even if we want to make the argument, okay, well, there was a cataclysm and the cataclysm, ended, right? And you won't allow me to make the ancient Egyptians, black people. I'm saying of this era, the people that went in there and discovered Egypt, let's just say it was already there in like 3000 BC, like those people were black. Personally, I think the timelines are way the hell off, especially when you're talking the Younger Dryas period and you're talking, Göbekli Tepe, and them saying that that's 12,500 years old. And then the other thing that just irritates me, and I keep making the point about how black people are the most ancient people. Again, that post that I made about the damn Jarawa, and I'm like, they were over there in the Bay of Bengal, on their little canoes and shit in, 55,000 years ago. Like the last woolly mammoth died 5,000 years ago, somewhere in Siberia. Right? They started to go extinct 10,000 years ago. Blue eyes only came into existence 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. The Neanderthal disappeared 30,000 years ago. And black people were running around, doing their thing. Nobody else was here. It was just black people. I swear, I don't know why this is like such a Planet of the Apes type of situation for people. Like they want to just, leave black people in this box of, the transatlantic slave trade and the Arab slave trade, and they're just nothing but animals and they couldn't accomplish anything. I'm like, do you have any idea like how much time has passed when if these time periods are off, which they've essentially already proven to be way the hell off? First off, all this Abrahamic religion gets flushed down the toilet because, the earth, what did they say? Everything happened, 6,000 years ago. Let them tell it. The earth was created 6,000 years ago. Well, that went down the toilet. Hell, that goes down the toilet when you start talking about dinosaurs and you start talking about fossil records. Like even some of the stone that's used for, the pyramids have fossils in them. So, it just kills me the way that people will, just the mental gymnastics they go through to try to, put down the idea that ancient Egypt was a black civilization. Like I said, all this time, I ain't never seen this type of smoke, come out of, Egyptians or any other group of people other than the extreme, white supremacists like the Red Ice people that would, they would have their little videos off on this, we was Kangs, right? They do the little mocking thing, right? But I'm just saying, I never saw this type of energy when it came to any other white people playing Egyptians in movies, whether it's, Elizabeth Taylor, or whether it's Russell Crowe, or whether it's what's that guy's name? The guy that played what's his name? The guy that played Batman. Christian Bale. You know what I'm saying? Like, Charlton Heston. Like, there's been no heavy complaints. There hasn't even really been any retroactive complaints. Some sort of cancel culture complaints. right? Bassem Youssef gets up there and talks, oh, we're not depicted. I'm like, bro, you don't, like where are your movies at? Where are y'all putting together some Hollywood shit or some Egyptian Hollywood type of stuff? It's just nuts, man. It's like the Arabs came in there with their Arab expansion. They made it all the way to the Maghreb, converted all of those people, the people of Carthage, right? Converted all of them to Islam, and then they crossed the water and went into, Spain, and converted all of them, or as many as them as they could to Islam, and then left or got kicked out in 1492. That's how that shit went down. But nah, they want to sit there and act like, you come in with all this Arab shit and then claim, oh, we the original people. Like, that shit is wild to me. I know some Egyptians, have stayed. I know some Egyptians have been there for a long time. But even people were telling me about, oh, well, what about the Coptic people? And the Coptic people are more connected to the Greeks than anything else. Even the Coptic language is not demonic or however you say it. The Coptic language is based off of Greek. Basically, it's reconfigured Greek letters. That's the Coptic language, because basically, they're like this merging of the Greeks and the already watered down Egyptians, that were there. And there's multiple phases of the changing of the ancient Egyptian language over time with these other groups coming in. It's like even now as an American, we don't speak ye old English. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like that movie. What was that shit? Romeo? Was it Romeo Must Die? No, it wasn't Romeo Must Die. That was Jet Li and Aaliyah. No, the shit with Leonardo DiCaprio, freaking Romeo and Juliet. That's my favorite rendition of Romeo and Juliet. And I love the fact it had all that new style, and then they spoke literally like they spoke, in Shakespearean times. Even though they cut one of my favorite parts, which is scene 2, act 2, they cut that short, when he was like hollering at her in the window. But anyway, it just, I don't know what else to say about this, but it's like every time they try to mental gymnastic a new argument, it's just so easy to get around. I'm like, if you're saying the original people, let's look at the things that would signify an original people, such as language, or such as, whether it's verbal, spoken language, or whether it's written language. And there's nothing in the hieroglyphs that suggests anything about a Levantine culture. But let the Arabs try to tell it, or the people that are Arab supremacist or descendant of Arabs, they want to claim the shit. I'm like, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs are between that and Sumerian cuneiform. These are like the two oldest languages two oldest written languages in the world. And like I said, when you go over there to the Chinese language, Chinese, if you there's plenty of videos that talk about Chinese characters and how how they're set up, and it's the same thing. They start out as pictures. They start out as a person, and they draw a person, or they'll draw a shovel, and then they'll draw it's all drawn out, and then it just turned into characters over time. But if you go and you study I don't know what they call it, but if you study the Chinese characters, you'll see, and again, there's plenty of videos on YouTube. You can pull it up, and they'll show you how this symbol came to mean this. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh shit, that does look like a stick figure. That does look like a person. Oh, and then they'll put the shit over. Oh, it looks like a person in a building. Oh, so that means a house or whatever. It's real interesting. You know what I mean? But that's how languages develop. But yeah, these people, they want you to believe that they were sitting over there in Palestine, and then all of a sudden decided to come up with a language that incorporates animals that they've never seen because those animals are in quote unquote Sub-Saharan Africa. I'm like, bro, make it make sense. But anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. I don't want to make this video too long. I just wanted to share that with y'all because, I just thought it was kind of funny because I'm like, man, y'all really are over here trying. But I'm like, that shit is not going to work. You're not going to get past me with your flawed logic. Your flawed logic. Like your logic is flawed, and my brain doesn't process flawed logic like that. Sorry, but not sorry. They really, I mean, it's so funny because they really over here, like, they really think they making some sense. Like, yeah, I got this nigga. I'm like, no, you didn't. You know what I mean? And now, I typed up my shit and responded. Now I can't get a response. I was like, nah, you was coming with all this energy. Now all of a sudden you ghost. Now all of a sudden you ain't around in the comments. You know what I mean? Like I'm giving links. That's another thing. I'm giving links. I'm giving receipts. I just don't come with conjecture and feelings. I'm like, okay, here's the evidence. What are you gonna argue with? And see, these people, like, they're so hell bent on ancient Egypt wasn't black. It wasn't black. It wasn't black. It wasn't black. Like, I'm like, wow. Like, so you're gonna ignore all these statues with the noses busted off of them, all these paintings of clearly black people, the freaking hair texture, the color of skin, the color of the hair, and even like on the statues that don't have their noses busted off them, where you can clearly see the black African features in the statues. Like, it's just nuts to me. And again, I'm not saying that being black equates to you got to look like Idi Amin. From freaking Uganda. Like, no. But these are black African people. And then that's another thing. And they want to recategorize all these people and they're everything but they're Cushitic, they're this, they're that, they're they're in a different lane, they're in a different category again. So it's like they have all these fail-safe devices in place. First will tell you, oh no, these people they're not black, they were Arab. Then when you prove that wrong, then they go, oh, well, I mean, the people of Ethiopia and the Nile Valley and the people of Aswan, the Nubians, they're not really black. They're the Cushitic people, and they're in a different category. They ain't like them West Africans. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, they just go out of their way. Then when you get to the blue black people, like the Nilotic people, like the Sudanese people, you know what I mean, where there's pyramids, in Sudan. Now they got to find a different category for that. Nah, they're Nilotic. They're not West African people. I'm like, damn. Like, again, there's like strong anti, Bantu speaking anti-blackness, that's out here. You know what I mean? Like they do not want a motherfucker that looks like Wesley Snipes to have anything to do with ancient Egypt. Like they will dodge, even though, again, you see it in the paintings, you see it in the murals, you see it in the people that I personally believe just simply fled and adjusted and adapted to the new climate. I mean, you see this with Lake Chad right now. Like, they're struggling because Lake Chad is literally drying the fuck up. Like 90% of it is gone from, apparently what it used to be. And people are trying to figure out what they're going to do. They're not catching as many fish. I mean, it's a whole shit show. You can go pull it up on YouTube. A whole bunch of videos about the, Lake Chad and the problems that it's causing, for the local economy and people to survive. And again, when water is gone and animals are gone and livestock it can't graze and all that other shit, if you want to survive, you gots to move. You know what I mean? There's no shame in that. You know what I mean? It's just like a lot of people didn't pick up on, like in the other video that I did, that the pictures that were showing all those boats that were just like in a dry seabed, that's the Aral Sea. That's the sea that, I don't know, the Russians were trying to build a dam or do something, and basically, they stopped the, lakes are built up from, the the whole life cycle of rainfall from mountaintops, glaciers, snow peaks, and then the water runs down, and then at the lowest elevation, if there's a depression, it'll create a lake. But anyway, Russians were doing their whole playing God and trying to re-engineer the landscape and whatnot. Now the Aral Sea is abandoned. Nobody's there. Those fishermen are no longer there anymore. Why would they stay there? You know what I mean? And then if another group of people come in there and they are able to make it work, they don't get to just stay there. Oh, we're the original people. No, you're not. You a bunch of people that figured out a way, or maybe the climate changed or whatever to function, in this region, in this space. And truth be told, Egypt is a wasteland other than directly on the Nile. I mean, even when it comes to, the where's this at? Hippos. Because I asked Chat GPT about the hippos. No, there were no hippos in the Levant region. Hippos are native to Sub-Saharan Africa and are not found in the Levant or any other regions outside of Africa. The closest place where hippos can be found to the Levant is in the Nile River in Egypt, but they do not extend beyond that region. In ancient times, hippos were commonly found in the Nile River and in marshy areas surrounding it, but not in the Levant. Surrounding it, which means, again, if the Sahel was higher than where it is during the Younger Dryas period, when I mean higher, I mean like just picture Africa and then picture that Sub-Saharan African line with your hand, and then just move it up as the rainforest of the Congo expands because there's more rainfall and vegetation is getting water and the nutrients that it needs and whatnot, and then it's able to freaking grow and flourish. Right? It's very simple to understand. But without the Nile River, which is why the Egyptians are going crazy about what Ethiopia is trying to do with their building of the dam, without that Nile River, ancient Egypt is a wasteland. There's nothing there. So having that slightly different climate, plus you have the river there. Oh, I'm pretty sure that the greenery kind of expanded out a lot further than where it actually does now, where they just kind of run in the desert. But anyway, where am I at? What time is it? Oh, damn, 47 minutes. I wanted to make that shorter, but anyway, that's my video. SWP out. Don't forget to comment, share, like, and subscribe.